Hello, welcome to this video resource from the Connection Church, where you will experience a casual place with serious faith. We invite you to come check it out for yourself this Sunday morning. Visit our website, theconnectionchurch.org, for service times and locations. Now, get ready to hear another fun and practical message about how you can get connected to God and the people around you.
I'd like to confess some things to you today. Technically, these may not be sins, but I do feel bad about them. Promise you won't tell anyone. I tell people I'm on a low-carb diet, but technically, I'm just eating pasta while lying on the floor. I ran out of Post-it notes, and now I don't know how to remind myself to buy more. I get angry wasting time having to wait 5 seconds for a YouTube ad, even though really, I'm just wanting to watch a video of a cat playing a piano. Wow, that feels really good getting those off my chest. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll forgive me.
All right, good afternoon. So good to see you. For those of you who are here, you braved the elements. Some of you came by boat. Some of you came by, you swam here, and you are here. This is a great day to be here because we are kicking off our brand new series called Confessions of a Bold Pastor. No, I lobbied for that one, but instead it's Confessions of a Bald Pastor. Now, I do have to confess that I'm living a lie, that I actually have a full head of hair, but I've shaved my head bald just so I can look more like The Rock. You know, I feel like that's the cool look. But no, as we kick this series off, you know, really what I'm trying to do is I want to be honest about some of the struggles that I face, because I think we're not all that different. I don't know if you maybe have faced some of the same struggles, but I think there's power when we give our secrets away, when we choose to just come clean. And at the Connection Church, we have a come as you are culture where there are no perfect people allowed. And we want to have a place where it is okay to not be okay. Many times when it comes to church, a lot of people feel like they have to sort of pretend. They have to put on their Sunday best and come to church and pretend like they understand all the church talk and pretend like they don't have any problems and act like even this past week we've done absolutely nothing wrong and life is great and paint on the smile. And the reality is so far different from that. The reality is the reason that I'm here is because I don't measure up and I do fall short. And the reason that I'm here is because I need Jesus and I need you. We need each other. I hope that you feel that same way. And so I want to talk about some of the struggles that I have faced, and like struggles like insecurity, struggles like praying, and even hypocrisy. And today we're going to be talking about doubt. I don't know, have you ever had any doubts when it comes to God? Anybody? Is it just me? Sure. We all, if we're honest, we've all had those doubts. And for me, I feel like it started back when I was younger as a kid. And I grew up in a home where my dad was a full-blown alcoholic. And so I was very afraid of my dad growing up. And when I was 10 years old, I remember at that time, I would get up, and in the morning when I was getting ready for school, I would get up very quietly, go get my 5-year-old brother up and help him get ready for school. And we would try to be as quiet as we could so we wouldn't wake up our dad. We'd get out of the house that way. And yet at the same time, I wanted God to do something to change my dad, to help him, and really to help my parents stay together, because I didn't want my parents to divorce. I really thought it was important that our family was together. But when I was 12 years old, my parents divorced, and it seemed like no matter how much I prayed, like nothing changed in that situation. And so that began, I think, set a pattern in me where I have doubted, does God care about what I'm going through? Will God do something to change my situation? So my struggle has not been really, is there a God? Does God exist? But the bigger struggle for me is, does God care? Will he do anything about my situation? And your struggle, it could be about God. It could be, is there a God? And you may have doubts about that. And I've kind of looked into what are the reasons that people doubt that there's a God or don't believe that there's a God. And they'll say things like, well, there's too much evil in the world. There's too much suffering in the world. There's too much injustice in the world. And they'll say things like, different religions have different ideas about who God is, so who could ever know who could be correct? And what it comes down to is somebody who doesn't believe in God has made a decision. They've said, I'm going to choose not to believe. And for me personally, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around, to say that there is no God, because if you're going to even make the claim that there's too much wrong with the world, well, what are you basing that on? I mean, who's to say what is right and what is wrong if there's no creator, if there's no God? Or maybe, people who say, well, there's too much injustice in the world. It seems like every culture across the planet has a sense of, we want justice to happen. And yet the Bible and Christianity says that God is the one who is the judge, and ultimately he's the one that's going to set things right. So Christianity actually has the answer for a lot of these problems or these doubts about who God is. But I think the biggest stumbling block for me, and maybe for you, is just kind of the amount of suffering in the world. I was looking at some of the numbers and found that there are 8,000 people who will die today and who die each and every day from preventable diseases. And over half of those are kids under the age of 5. I mean, that is heartbreaking. It's also true that there's enough food to feed everyone in the entire planet, and yet 815 million people will go to bed hungry tonight. The International Labor Organization says that there are 40.3 million victims of sex trafficking in our world today. So you see, there's a lot of needless suffering in our world. And so, that's been kind of where I've wondered, God, why aren't things just a little better? And back when I was in seminary, right, where good pastors go to die. When I was there, I was the guy in class who would kind of, as we were talking about some of these issues of, God being good and he's able to do anything. And so why doesn't he? And, and there are answers to those problems and those questions. But for me, I would say, but couldn't God have just made things just a little better than they are? Why does there have to be so much suffering? Like, why did God create mosquitoes? Is there any purpose for that? So there's those kinds of questions, and as I studied the questions and the answers in seminary, for the most part, what I found is that every problem, every question, there are good, solid answers from people who have dedicated their whole life to find the answers. And it's important that as we study, instead of just embracing our doubts, that we say, I'm going to hear from the doubters. I'm going to hear from the skeptics. And I'm going to hear from those who do believe. And I'm going to see what are the answers. It turns out that there are a lot of pastors who struggle with doubt. A third of pastors have said that doubt there have been significant seasons of doubt in their ministry. And for me, the doubt, sometimes there'll be just those flashes of, is they're a God, but really it's more just, does God care? Does God care about my financial situation? Will God do something about my physical health, my physical situation? Or when I'm praying for someone else, to believe that God really cares enough to do something, to intervene and to act. And for me personally, and maybe for you, you can relate, sometimes I've found myself believing in God, but living like there is no God. Believing in God, but living as if He doesn't exist. So what is it that we should do with our doubts? And some of you may say, well, I just don't really struggle with doubt like that. Maybe you have an incredible gift of faith, or maybe for you, you just sort of decided to check your brains at the door. The thing is, doubt is not the enemy of faith. And doubt is not the opposite of faith. But doubt is actually a necessary ingredient for faith. I like to eat Greek yogurt, okay? And I know some of you are like, that's really disgusting, but it's got a lot of protein in it, so it's a good, healthy snack. And the kind that I like is the kind that has the fruit at the bottom, right? So you take you got to take it and you got to stir it up and mix it up really good and get all that fruit in there. And it's been said when it comes to faith and doubt that faith is kind of like the yogurt with the good, the solid, healthy stuff. But then the doubt can be like that fruit, and it's got to be kind of mixed up in there. And if you will deal with your doubts, and if we can deal with our doubts in the right way, what happens is we find that our doubts can actually strengthen our faith in the process. Our doubts can help us grow deeper roots in our faith when we explore and we begin to find the answers that we're looking for. And our doubts should drive us deeper. Our doubts should draw us closer to God. So I want us to look today at how do we overcome our doubts. And the first step that I have had to take is I've had to admit my doubts. I've got to come clean with the fact that I do have some doubts, that I don't have all this figured out. And in Mark 9:21, there's this desperate dad who makes this last-ditch effort to bring his sick, possessed son to Jesus. And so in Mark 9:21, Jesus is speaking. He asks, how long has this been happening? Jesus asked the boy's father. And he replied, since he was a little boy. The Spirit often throws him into the fire or into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us. And then he adds, if you can. Now, this boy had been sick for so long, and this dad had almost given up all hope that anything was going to change in his situation and that his boy would ever be healed. And, I can relate to that. I can relate to this where I think, can God do something? Can He do something? And my answer to that is yes, He probably can. But then I ask, will He do something about this situation? And then I'm not so sure. And notice he asks Jesus for help, but he adds, out loud, he says it, if you can. And so often when I'm praying, I'll pray for something, but in the back of my mind after I pray, maybe those words will flash through my head. If you can. And I don't say those out loud, but at least this desperate dad is honest enough to come clean about his doubts. And if we want to deal with our doubts and we want to move past our doubts, we got to be honest about what they are so that we can deal with them. And maybe for you, your doubts, you may doubt God's existence. God, are you really there? God, if you're really there, would you just show yourself to me in some tangible way? Or maybe you say you would doubt God's goodness. God, are you really good? Do you really care? If you really care, why am I going through this? Why is this happening? Or maybe you doubt God's presence, His involvement. God, if you're so powerful and you can do something. Why don't you do something? Now, sometimes we have these doubts, and I would say instead of them being legitimate doubts, they're more like smoke screens that we throw up, to keep God at a distance. Because we think, well, if I press into God, if I press into Him, I know He's going to make some claims on my life, and He's going to have some expectations of my life. And so, people like this that you'll talk to them about God, and they'll kind of pull out their pet questions. Like they'll say, well, if God exists, then can He create, and He's all powerful, can He make a rock that's so big that He can't lift it? And you're like, come on, really? Those are not sincere seeking kind of, questions, because sometimes we just want to keep, hold on to our doubts because, hey, I want to keep sleeping with this person that I'm sleeping with, or I want to do whatever it is I want, and so I don't want to really fully believe and fully follow. And sometimes we're afraid to dive into our doubts because we're afraid of what we'll find down there. Like, I don't really want my faith to be shaken. What if there are no answers? And what if I find out that what I believe isn't true? And so you're just kind of happy floating through life with your kind of surface sort of beliefs. The problem is that a faith that hasn't been tested is a faith that can't be trusted. And so you'll see people like this who, they have some surface kind of beliefs, but then they get sick, or they lose somebody that they love, or they go off to college many times, and you begin to be exposed to some different, views and some different views of the world, and all of a sudden your faith is rocked, or somebody begins to ask you the hard questions. You've never tested your faith. You've never developed anything below the surface. And if you haven't ever gone below the surface, then it's not really true faith. It's more like brainwashing, from a cult. We haven't really tested it and laid a foundation. Listen, God is not threatened by your hard questions. He's not. God is bigger than your doubts. And there are answers if we will not be afraid to admit that we have some doubts and begin to ask the questions. And then we need to not only admit my doubts, but I also need to allow Jesus to meet me where I am. Notice what happens here in this verse. Jesus responds to him and says, "What do you mean, if I can?" Jesus asked. "Anything is possible if a person believes." Jesus didn't say some things are possible. He didn't say a few things are possible. He said anything is possible if you believe. And so the starting point of faith and dealing with our doubts is simply coming to Jesus. You might not even fully believe at that point, but notice Jesus doesn't send him away. He meets him right where he's at, and he says anything is possible. So I need to allow Jesus to meet me where I am, and then I need to act on the faith that I do have. See, we're all a mixture of faith and doubt. And for some of us, we might be honest and say, I've got more doubt than I do faith. Mark 9:24, it says, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, he said, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." I love this verse. I love this honest statement that he makes. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And so you see both at work there. And the word for unbelief here is the Greek word apostia. And it means not fully persuaded. There's this old worship song from way back in the day called Almost Persuaded. And I always thought that was a really funny title, for a song. Almost persuaded, like I'm almost there, I'm not quite there. And I think a lot of us, if we're honest, that's kind of where we're at today. We don't feel like, maybe you don't feel like you've got a lot of faith, but hey, look at the faith that you do have. Look at the faith that this desperate dad had. He had enough faith to bring his son to Jesus. He had enough faith to approach Jesus and enough faith to risk ridicule in front of the crowd. So he did have some faith. And the key is to lean into the faith that we do have and to do something with that faith. And so I was looking, what are some steps that we can take today to help us to reject our doubts and to receive more faith? Well, I want us to look at one other story, one other person in the New Testament. And this was a guy who was known for his doubts, right? Doubting Thomas. And how would you like to be known for your biggest flaw? I mean, what if whenever you walked in the room, people said, "Oh, here comes dishonest Dave. Here comes greedy Glenn. Here comes stab you in the back Steve. Oh, and watch out for lustful Lou. You got to watch out." So, doubting Thomas, he was known for his doubts, but I think he got a bad rap for these doubts because he really became a person of such great faith in Jesus that he literally gave his life for Jesus. And at some point, he turned the corner. It's been said that those who doubt and work to overcome their doubts become some of the strongest followers of Jesus. So when did he turn that corner? Well, here's what happened. Jesus had died on the cross, he rose again, and he appeared to 10 of the disciples that had gotten together, that were together. He appeared to these 10 disciples, and the disciples, it was 10 because Judas had hung himself and Thomas was off somewhere doubting. And the disciples were so excited. They saw Jesus alive. They had seen him die, and now they knew he was alive. And so in John 20:24, it says, one of the disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side." And I know he gets a bad rap for this, but you got to know that the disciples, they weren't the sharpest tools in the box, and they had messed up a lot, right? And so they said to Thomas, "Hey, Jesus, we saw Jesus, he's alive." And Thomas is like, "I saw him dead. And I'm glad you guys are excited about this, but in order for me to believe it, I'm not going to take your word for it." I don't know if you got friends like that where you're like, "I don't think I'm going to base my whole theology and my whole eternal destiny on what your experience was. I got to see this for myself. I got to see Jesus for myself." But the problem was, see, Thomas, he wasn't in the right place where he needed to be in order to position himself in the best place to meet Jesus and to experience Jesus. And one way that we can take a step to defeat our doubts is to make sure that we get together with other Christians. There are too many Thomases today who have said, "I don't know, I have these doubts and I'm not going to put myself in a position, I'm going to separate myself from the church." And there's a lot of people who've done that. Some people, they're like, "I kind of believe, but I think I'll just watch some YouTube videos and, I'll just do some things on my own." And what happens is they're not in the right place to be able to experience what God has for them. They've distanced themselves from God's people. And, even if you have a lot of doubts, one of the best ways to deal with them is to put yourself in a position, in a place where you can draw close and you can discover more about the truth and about the evidence. And I've got a real confession to make, okay? This is for real, and this is a very sad confession, and I'm serious. I'm really serious. I have to say that because so often I'm not serious, and I'm sorry about that. But for the past several years, I have not been in a connection group. And I've been telling you to be in a connection group, and I have, made excuses, and I've done some different things, to try, kind of substitute for that. But I just want to come clean about that and say I'm sorry that I have not been in a connection group, and I've made a new commitment now this semester to step up and be in a connection group myself, because I don't want to be guilty of not doing what I'm asking you to do, okay? Thank you. So connection groups are so important, and we believe that everybody needs to be a part of one. And some of you are like, well, what is that? Well, connection groups are small groups that meet throughout the week in homes, and where you pray together, you grow together, you eat together, you help each other. And God has done so many great things to grow people's faith by being a part of a connection group. So now we're about to start a new semester of groups, and we want to encourage everybody. Everybody needs to be a part of one of these groups. That will help you to overcome your doubts. I want us to look on in John 20:26. It says, the doors were locked, but suddenly as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. He greeted Thomas. He didn't reject Thomas. He didn't chew him out, and he didn't make him feel bad about his doubts, but he met him where he was. And then he said to Thomas, put your fingers right here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. He gave Thomas exactly what he needed so that he could move forward in his faith, so that he could believe. And the Bible doesn't tell us whether Thomas ever even took him up on his offer to put his hand in his side. Instead, he saw Jesus, and he believed, and he heard Jesus' words where Jesus said, don't be faithless any longer. And I think that's what Jesus would say to you and me today, is he would say to us, don't be faithless any longer. And if you will bring your doubts to Jesus, he's going to meet you right where you're at and give you what you need in order to believe, so that you can see Jesus for who he is. And this next statement from Thomas in John 20:28, it's been said is the most accurate description of Jesus in the Gospels, in the New Testament, because Thomas looks at Jesus and he says, my Lord and my God. And he proclaims that Jesus is God. Now the Jewish people, they wouldn't even write the name God. They wouldn't even write it because it was so sacred and so holy. And yet Thomas proclaims that this man standing before him is God in the flesh. His doubt was shattered, and he was ready to live his life serving Jesus. John 20:29 says, then Jesus told him, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. He's talking about you and me. Those of us who we haven't seen Jesus in the flesh, but we've experienced his power at work in our lives. And I think of my own life. I think back to that 12-year-old boy who was having trouble seeing God's hand working in my life, in the life of my family. And yet I've seen through the years, as I've leaned into my faith and brought my doubts to him, that somehow God has been able to take this, in many ways, fatherless boy and use my life to make a difference, some kind of difference for him. And I believe that's what he wants to do for you as well. When you take the doubts and the fears and the questions that you have and bring them honestly to him. I want us to stand together right now. And I just want us to be honest and come clean in this place. And even if you're watching online, that we would be honest right now and we would say, that you would say, I have some fears. I've got some doubts. I've got some questions. And these questions have kept me at a distance from God. Would you be bold enough to lift your hand, if that's you, to say, God, I do have some questions. And God, I want to bring them honestly before you today and allow you to meet me right where I'm at so that I can take steps to begin to act on the faith that you have given me and the faith that I do have. I bring my doubts and my fears and my questions to you. I want to pray for you. God, I pray that, God, even though we would say, I do believe, we would also say, help me in my unbelief. Help me to grow my faith and my trust in you, to take steps to move forward and not to keep you at a distance, but God, to allow my doubts to drive me even deeper, my roots even deeper into a stronger relationship with you. God, that we would know beyond a shadow of a doubt, God, that you do care, that you do see us, God, and that you are working for our good, that you're creating a beautiful story with our lives. Lord, we thank you for what you can do with lives that are fully surrendered to you. And today, we want to surrender to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.
Hello and welcome to the Connection Church. We're so glad you're here with us today, and here's some ways that you can get connected. On September 30th, you'll have the opportunity to publicly commit to raise your children according to God's Word and God's ways with our parent-child dedication services. To participate in this fall's dedication service, you'll need to attend the mandatory parent meeting on Sunday, September 23rd at 1 p.m. in the conference room. Lunch and childcare will be provided. For more information, write the word child on your connection card. Girl Time is back. It happens tomorrow, September 10th at 7 p.m. Ladies, you're invited to a night filled with friends, faith, food, and fun. You'll be encouraged and inspired to grow in your faith in God, and you'll have the chance to connect with other ladies at the Connection Church as well. Childcare is free but is required when you RSVP to Sandy at theconnectionchurch.org by midnight tonight. Students 7th through 12th grades, you're invited to the 4th annual Fuse Hooligans Party this Wednesday, September 12th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. There will be a live DJ, massive foam pit, prize giveaways, and more. For more info, contact Fuse at theconnectionchurch.org or talk to Pastor Bobby in the Fuse Lounge. Are you ready to take the plunge? We're celebrating Changed Lives next Sunday, September 16th in all of our celebration services. If you've decided to follow Jesus, but you haven't followed up with baptism, sign up today with your connection card. If this is your first time with us, you're our VIP. So text the word welcome to 512-359-3400 and visit the red carpet area to receive a free gift just for you.
We hope you enjoyed this video resource from the Connection Church, and we want to get connected with you. Visit theconnectionchurch.org for more information.